Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to continue my series part 3 here on psychotronic attack and weapons. And I think it's interesting to go over, what are these weapons? What are we talking about? Well, psychotronics is a general and specific term, and let's define this. I've made a course on consciousness machines, how they work, etc., and what are they? This is a general terminology, but it's also kind of specific if you're an expert like myself. And there are different terms. There's psychotronics, there's radionics, there's psionics. These are interchangeable terms. But they're not quite interchangeable. Radionics generally is, it's unclear where that came from. Some people think it came from Ruth Drown. Abrams did not state radionics, did not use that term. As far as I can tell, some people claim it goes back to the 20s, but you got to remember, as soon as there was radios, the term radionics started to be used, and we're talking about regular radios. It's kind of a common term, kind of a cool term. It's not a radio, it's radionics. So it didn't necessarily mean that. So it appears to go back to Ruth Drown, who thought the waves that would be putting off by this machine were radio in nature, which of course is absurd because of the fact that her machines in particular, from what I understand, and I even have some of them, were never really electric. She moved away from any electricity whatsoever while she copied Abrams' machines and made them simpler. And there's a whole history of hers, which I'll be going into sometime, which is quite fascinating. Quite a fascinating woman with an interesting background, whose son apparently became a doctor, a medical doctor. Isn't that interesting? But the term radionics is a misnomer, but it kind of fits the 19th, 20th century understanding of turning dials on this machine and putting energy out, kind of like you would do with a radio broadcaster or a receiver, and so forth. So that became the word that is today. If you start using these other words, then you have a problem with people understanding them. Psychotronics is kind of a sophisticated word. I've always liked psychotronics, psycho, electric, and of course, that's what it really is. This really was coined, I believe, or used during the Russian phase of getting involved in these kind of machines. And I don't know if it's credited directly to Pablita, the Czechoslovakian, was not Russian, was not German, Czechoslovakian, who designed all these machines that put off energy just by the shape of them. So you put a ball next to a square, and you put a rectangle on top of that, and you encase it. It's not much is known about that. It's kind of a confusing area. But was able to, by using shapes, to generate some sort of energy to the effect that he could kill insects with it and other things. Now, this is reported in the book Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, or it's that famous book, and whose name the author escapes me, Sheila or something. That was released in the 70s. You can buy that almost any place for a few bucks. Everybody should read that. I don't know how real all that is or not. She claimed to have went over there with her friend and saw all of this stuff, and this is where it came from. He has a patented device, Pablita, who's been long dead, of apparently sharpening razor blades. This was a fun thing people did in the 70s and 80s. You'd put them under a kind of a pyramid type thing. Unfortunately, nothing became his work. Nothing was of any great extent. Somebody years ago was going to translate his information. And this is the problem when you're involved in any non-English speaking language. You can take what you learn and put it in the trash until everything is converted into English, which everybody around the world then can use because of the simplicity of the language. We're never going to get anywhere. And there are long videos, which I have posted on the website, of him demonstrating his stuff. I'm not sure what to make of that. It is interesting, but without a little bit of description, it is kind of confusing. So psychotronics, and of course there was a large number of these types of devices produced by the Soviet Union. There are some pictures of this that the KGB was using. These are top secret. Psychotronic weapons were outlawed in a treaty, I believe it was either by Clinton or Carter. I'm not sure. It may even go back as far as Carter, where they got together in a treaty and said, we're not going to use these, which means they have them and they are using them. So the whole idea is these were a very unique type of, and psychotronics is good. There doesn't seem to be any electrical energies involved. It's the mind-shaped consciousness driving things. Very fascinating. And of course, that's what all of these things are ultimately. Radionics don't really produce any energies, regardless if the machine is electronic. And this is a whole nother discussion, which I won't get too heavily into here. Then, of course, there's the term psionics, which is a term that has been used in science fiction novels for the last 50 years. It's still used today commonly in role-playing games as some sort of super psychic techniques, tendencies, and tools. It is not used any other place. You're not going to find anybody really talking about psionics out there in any kind of serious fashion. It's all now relegated to the game industry, which is unfortunate because that's another word I liked. Psychic, electronic. Makes sense because that's what you're talking about here. So these are all based basically on the use of human consciousness energies through some sort of amplifying circuit. Now, these amplifying circuits are usually fairly simplistic, and then there's usually some sort of amplification, but not necessarily, meaning that you then put it through some sort of amplifier that takes these psychic consciousness energies, amplifies them, and projects them out to some degree. It all works on a quantum understanding of connecting with a particular target. Now, that's what you call psychotronics. Now, what I believe is being used right now is a hybrid of using electromagnetic weapons that broadcast with psychotronics, meaning they're using some sort of electrical field and broadcasting. And this is something that I've been researching for many years and found to be very effective. You can use a carrier wave from a satellite, electromagnetic, etc., tie your psychotronic thought form energetic informational field. This is an energetic informational field into these and piggyback them to anyone and any around the world. Now, the Russians have been broadcasting, which was a large antenna that was, of all things, hooked up to and powered by Chernobyl, which, by the way, is still bursting out boring, terrible energies, poisoning the planet. And nobody wants to pay for it. They just want to pay for battleships to kill each other. I guess faster? So how does that work? But this is what is commonly thought. Now, this antenna was broadcasting to the West, and this was a time when the West went under great changes, so we don't know. They're broadcasting these kind of psychotronic carrier waves through this huge antenna to the West. And, of course, the West did go through the 60s and all the things that happened, which, to a large extent, I consider positive. But it also was a birth of a lot of decay. A lot of crime, deviant factors started to happen around the West. Things that you never heard of. People never locked their doors in the 40s and 50s. This started in the 60s and so forth, supposedly. The panacea of how great everything was is an illusion to those people who lived through it. All I knew in the 70s in middle-classy Connecticut, where I was living at the time, there was nothing but a bunch of scumbuckets, corrupt police, and everything else, and that was 1964. So I'm not sure the panacea that was there. Certainly, you had to lock your doors, particularly from those hillbilly white New Englanders. So we do need to understand that this is a real thing. Now, this didn't stop until apparently Chernobyl actually blew up. And is that connected? Did somebody do that deliberately? We don't know. So they were broadcasting whatever these waves were through carrier waves of a physical nature. And this is what I believe all the psychotronics is. Now, it's really hard to define this. This is the top secret information you'll never hear about. Aliens, all that stuff. Well, that's right under this to a degree, but they let more and more of that out. And there's certainly an awful lot of alien information. How much psychotronic information is there? Tiny bit of information, and it's super class secret. You could buy a Russian MiG when the Soviet Union started to fall apart, and all sorts of other weapons, but you couldn't buy a psychotronic unit. That ought to tell you something. So all of that is quite fascinating, and this, of course, isn't new. This has been practiced through China and everything else, where there is a certain book on that, which I'll be talking about in another audio, which was written by a Chinese man who's written several books on these areas, which is very interesting. Again, how much is real, we just don't know. But needless to say, all of these kind of studies are going on, and other countries don't have the kind of Judeo-Christian nonsense going on in their head to be bothered by this. You know, the Chinese don't have these problems. They use magic all the time. Corporate and so forth. They spend millions of dollars designing their buildings. And there are buildings in Hong Kong and China where they have $1 million feng shui cannons on the top of it to shoot the energy back at their competition, and vice versa. So if they're doing that, what do you think is going on in these sacred halls? Same thing with Russia. Russia don't care. They're mathematicians, and we know this from, I think it's Grabani, who came out with his mathematician radionic type symbols, claims to be able to do everything. Is a guy who's a top official in all the colleges, is well known, has lots of awards, and came up with this whole system of psychotronic radionic use. And guess what? No problems there to a degree. Of course, he made so many claims he got into trouble with the government, or maybe he was too public about his psychotronic radionic work. I don't know. I claim to. So is stated, who knows if it's true or not, that he could raise the dead. I find that hard to believe. You have to be kind of stupid to make those claims and charge people for it. It sounds to me like a setup, but who knows? People do tend to get crazy when they get power. They think you can do everything. And then they really can't prove it. Tim Rethat. So the whole idea is that these are serious situations that we need to look into. So there are these types of machines that have been used. And of course, you know, there's so many weapons like this, and we just don't know how they're using them. There were broadcasts to the American embassy where all of the embassy officials over there, the ambassadors to the Soviet Union, I think there was 3 of them, came down with cancer while they were working there. Employees were getting cancer. It was found out that the American embassy in Moscow was being bombarded by these kind of waves. Now, isn't that, I keep saying, this is the perfect weapon. If you go around and shoot somebody or they die in a car out, well, you always look at it and say, well, yeah, they caused that. The Ruskies did that. Yeah, we don't know. If someone dies of cancer and other thing, it's still, oh, you paranoid Americans. What the hell, you're paranoid. This is why they talk to everybody. And, you know, they're the perfect way to affect and take somebody out is using weapons that really are not traceable. What you're tracing is the effects. All of a sudden, a bunch of people are sick in an embassy. A bunch of people get cancer. What does that mean? Well, you can say all you want that this is not coincidental, but ultimately people look at you and say, well, it's coincidental. That's just the way it is. So these type of things are very, very potent, and people don't understand that. Now, you know, I've always used the example for many years. Would you prefer to get punched in the face, or would you prefer to get 500 x-rays? Now, if you got 500 x-rays, that could take 3, 4, 5 minutes, you would feel anything. None. You'd walk out of there, that was nothing. I certainly didn't get punched in the face, which would have hurt for a while, maybe even swell me up, etc. Well, the point is that 500 x-rays will kill you, just won't kill you instantly. A punch in the face will probably hurt you for a couple of weeks. So there's a difference there, and quite a bit of difference. So to think that one force, because it's so blunt, you could call that Newtonian physics, which is a fist hitting against another hard surface, and you can call it quantum physics, which is the effects of X-rays, which are energetic fields. The difference is one is quite deadly and the other one is just kind of ape-like. So these are the type of things. But there are very advanced weapons beyond it. And I believe that there is a blend of these weapons being used. And there again, there's lots of people researching this stuff that you'll never hear about. The use of psychotronic tools as weapons and empowerment are things that are hidden from you. These were used by the remote viewing teams in the military, which they refused to discuss that they had an actual empowerment type machine. Now, back then, probably it was a simple 8 hertz generator, which helped them remote view clearer. God knows what that would be today. But this is certainly not a new field, and there's plenty of people involved in it. Now, most likely, the Air Force has banks of these things in Cherokee Mountain using different types of psychotronic weapons to project around the world. I'm not sure who any of the good guys are. I'm not sure if they're targeting Russians and other people. They are kind of, they're the other mob. That's the bad mob. It's like a gangland war. The one gangland mobsters known as the U.S. Air Force against the other gangland mobsters known as the Russian Air Force or whatever the heck they're. So I mean, this is what's going on, and to what extent, we have no idea. Now, don't think that everybody in these particular cases are targeted randomly. I don't believe that. I believe they're deliberately targeted for anything that could be as wild as their possible future effects, and they're able to see this through different technologies to go into the future. Is that guy a threat? Well, it could be. Don't put these things out. Yes, these are wild science fiction type things, which always tend to be true. So what is all this? So people are targeted for a reason. They may be targeted and watched. Their parents may have been watched. Maybe their grandparents. Maybe they're doing all this. Now they have these kind of programs that go on endlessly, and they have trillions of dollars to fund everything. You may be a type of person that they like. It may be your genetic code, your particular racial background. We don't know. It doesn't seem to be happening, at least being expressed from. But the kind of mental situations that people express here seems to be crossing all cultures and races. The people coming out for psychotronic attack tend to seem to be, to me, and I'm sure they come from all walks of life, but they seem to be white people. Tend to be people apparently from some sort of European background, whatever white means, because that's a term that's really not known what it really is. So it's talked about, but to call it German white is is like calling the nighttime noon, the hot sun of noon. So those are not white people; those are Aryans, which are Arabs. So all of this is part of the actual understanding of what's going on and what they're using. Now, some of this is very important to figure out the kind and nature of these things. People who are under these kind of attacks would be best to assemble some sort of grounding or Faraday cage where they live, or at least when they sleep, which could then determine whether these kind of energies will affect you in that cage, which means that could probably not electromagnetic in nature, but if it's a combination wave, well, which I believe it is, and certainly I'm doing work like this, they certainly could do it with their money, is interesting. Now, they've put people in Faraday cages. Andrei Pasharik did this, and psychic messages got through without a problem. Tricky. Good idea, though, if you combine a wave that is part electromagnetic, which maybe a Faraday cage would nullify, but what would get through would be the thought form energy to affect the person anyway. Very interesting. So this could be all part of the process. We don't know. I mean, to do studies like this takes a lot of money, and I don't know anybody that's doing it. I mean, every single psychic researcher, except myself, seems to be nothing more than a government whore. They take all their money from the government, which then they can't report things for 20, 30, 50 years later, and they can't talk about it. They can't release anything. This happened with Russell Targ, with Uri Geller. Everything that Uri Geller was said he didn't do was filmed on camera showing him do it. 100% proof. But it gave the those dumb bunkers and idiot skeptics who are paid assassins in their own way time to formulate all this negativity against people when they were 100% correct. Now, Uri Geller even came out and sued the unamazing Randy and lost his case on many occasions for basically it was slander. So, yet he lost the cases there. So here, when he tried to do it, he couldn't do it and couldn't show proof because it was all secret. And this goes on all the time. For one, understand 5% of the patents out there are never given patents because there's security risks. So they grab the patent, they tell the people to shut up or we'll throw you in prison, and they lose that money. Or maybe the government gets it. It's known that the patent office will, if there's a great electronic breakthroughs, those information goes directly to a large manufacturer. So if you put out a device, an electrical device, that's a breakthrough, Sony has it within days. What a world, huh? So, with all that taken into consideration, we need to know what the real world is. Now, one of the problems with all these black op projects is what if they have machines that read your mind, everything else. They've had these for 20 years. What is all? The point is we just don't know what's going on. We have a secret space program. We're going to other planets. We've had deals with extraterrestrials. Oh, yeah, all this is crazy stuff. Yeah, it's just pretty much 100% proven as much as you can prove anything. People don't want to know the facts and the proof about things that are already out there. There's a whole book written on it of government papers confirming the presence of UFOs, crafts, and bodies, etc. It's all documented from U.S. documents that have been obtained through the Freedom of Information by Larry Fawcett. And he wrote a book about it, and you can get it on eBay. And it hasn't been around for years, but all this stuff that, you got people coming out today, Mr. Blink 182 wants to release, it's already been released. What are you doing, goofball? So, all of these things that are there are facts. So how do we do that? Now, there's all sorts of these type of technologies to manipulate people's brains. If you think they want to catch criminals like bin Laden and other people, well, you're as dumb as a rock if you think any of that. Do you think the military wants to win wars? Do you think the police want to end crime? Do you think the fire departments want to stop fires? That's their job. Without that, they're unemployed, which means they live on a box on the street. There's no motive to do any of this. So the point is, it's a complete and total joke. So all of these things are going on, and all of this type of research has been going on for at least 40 years now, if not longer. So they've developed these weapons, and how they're being used is interesting, but they certainly aren't targeting random people, or what I don't believe are random. It appears to be random, but they're targeting people who, for one reason or another, they are tracking and following, which is something that's done to hundreds of thousands of people. No, I would say millions, hundreds of millions of people are tracked and followed every day at a very fairly close range. And this is just another fact. They do this in all sorts of ways. So, we all need to understand that as a fact. Now, you're not going to believe that because you're not involved in it. And if you're not involved in the harassment and know what's going on and have communication with others, you don't believe any of this stuff because you're living in a dream world. Neo, it's time to wake up. Time to take the pill and see the real world. So these things are happening, and of course, if you're working the 9 to 5, struggling, taking care of probably an illness of yourself or a family member, life doesn't really matter like this. So I certainly understand that. But these are the other aspects, and there are many people who are suffering from these attacks. But it's a bigger picture that's going on. It's the lawlessness, it's the using of advanced technology to prey on your own people for your own sick reasons, and this is not new. So the CIA has been doing this for years with all their little helpers like Terence McKenna, who designed special hallucinogens to destroy people's minds for his handlers. So all of these things, I guess that's why he was loaded every second of his life on smoky dope. So the whole idea is that these are the facts that are out there. These types of things. Now, the whole idea is understanding this whole realm means, well, how then do you protect yourself from these kind of energies, and how do you ground them out around you so they don't affect you directly? Once they start affecting you directly, they have biological effects, which I believe are also connected to so many of the biological and even chemicals that are in our foods, which these type of tools may actually trigger to cause bizarre mental states. I still think that most everything in life is connected to some sort of virus or parasite. Why would that be? They're perfect mechanisms. They cannot be stopped. They adapt to everything and they grow and prosper. Why wouldn't you do that if that's what you're looking to affect masses? You want things that go into the brain. Well, these parasites, which I've talked about before, there are parasites that go into your brain and tell you to kill yourself. This has been proven. So, by people in the regular scientific industry, not people looking into this. So when we look into all this, it's a very complicated biostructure, and when you're dealing with these things, you want to deal with your cellular problems as well. So it's a physical, spiritual, mental thing, and you have to protect yourself from all of it. It's very complicated that if someone is affected by this, they've hit you with beams, they've generated all these toxins, all these viruses, all these parasites in your system that are now in your brain. Well, this is extremely difficult to deal with. Now, only radionic, energetic, informational fields could handle these kind of situations. But it also depends upon the toxins. There has been cases where someone is highly toxic and you start killing all these things in their brain, that this could clog their body and actually cause or assist their death because they are not gotten out of the body quick enough, and we have weak livers, kidneys, and everything else that goes with it. So there could be greater stress for a period of time, as happens with a lot of illnesses. You go through a healing crisis, as it's called, where you get sicker for a period of time until you start feeling better. Now, how is all this can be handled? If these things are producing physical results, it means that getting spirituals or spirits to come in and heal you could be very difficult. So is that a proper way to go about it? We don't know. But that would be more assuming that you have a spiritual problem that then can be released through spirit techniques. If it's a physical problem that has happened to you, well, maybe these healers, shamans, whether they're modern or ancient, can help you. The problem is that you are under constant attack. So you remove this stuff, you're under attack again, and you are reinfected. This is the problem with so many conditions. Well, we have this problem with people who are being cursed. Well, you can go in with the person that's being cursed and remove the curse. Well, that's great. The person feels better for a little while, and then it comes back. Why does it come back? Because the person cursing you has did it again. So you can protect that person and it will last for a period of time. But if someone continues to curse you, oftentimes they will break through the protection and you will be affected again. Now, this is a problem with this stuff when you get into the stages of releasing it. If it's a physical, biological effect, you have to be careful to make sure that you're flushing a person out slowly and getting rid of these things. You then have to try and insert in some sort of protective field so they can't be reinfected easily. You may have to keep a machine on you and 24/7 to keep you clear. This rates or these tunings of these machines will probably have to be changed frequently because they will try different attacks knowing that you have protection. Well, this is basic psychic, or I should say psychotronic warfare, which is not overly new. With using more primitive radionic machines, psychotronic, psionic warfare, psionic combat, which we actually published a book on many years ago, a primitive manual, but it did talk about these things. It talked about the fact of using machines like this, and of course, this was nothing new, even though the psychopath who wrote that was fairly unhinged. But the point is, it wasn't his invention. Everything he got was from science fiction anyway. So the point is how much of this is going on? How many people who are unstable, who do weird things, and so forth, are under psychotronic attack? We don't know. So it's just hard to say. Is it happening more than... I think it's happening quite a bit. I think it's happening with a lot of people. People don't act in their best interest most of the time. Of course, when you combine that with sex and greed and everything else, and you're dealing with the lowest energy force in the universe, Earth beings, it's hard to figure out what's going on. So this is a very, very complicated area, and you need to build up, particularly your etheric fields around you. This is your chakras and other things. One of the first lines of defense, I've talked about some of these tools, is a tool we've been using recently called the Prana Disc, which is actually, ironically, manufactured in Eastern Europe in a very particular fashion. Now, these tend to activate your cellular structures up to a higher level, so it keeps you at a strong level. Now, these are nice tools. Like everything else, they're not panaceas. So, and it's something that is a great help, and you can wear two of them to create a very strong field, and when you wear only one, you can use the other one to put your photograph on. And again, you have to use particular types of instant photographs to get the best results, particularly in cases like this. There's no cutting corners. So these are some of the good tools out there to strengthen your aura. A few pointers that were recently sent to me by a victim, and those who are interested should email me, and we are going to open up a free area for people to leave suggestions, get information, etc. in this area, which will be accessed through our website. But this will be a valuable free resource where people can share what works to protect themselves, not talk about their stories. Oh, I'm under terrible trouble, blah, blah. Well, fine. We have no problem with you discussing that. But what are you finding helps you? If we get enough people putting that together, maybe we find a synergistic solution to this. And that's what I'm all about, solutions. Problems we can talk about to the end of time. Only those who are highly evolved have solutions.